Today I've come out to compare two systems. On one side we got the Canon 7D Mark II with the Canon 100-400mm Mark II. I'm going to compare that. That's my system that I use normally with what Olympus has lent me, the Micro Four Third OM-D E-M1X, and that's with the 300mm f4. So, I mean, to say right off, they're pretty much, if you have this at 400mm and using this 300mm lens on this camera, it's a very similar kind of focal length, or what it looks like anyways. Obviously this is 400mm focal length, this is 300mm focal length. But the Micro Four Third is basically a crop 2 and this is crop 1.6. So I think this one here, the Canon 7D, then at 400 here is going to give me equivalent 640mm to full frame, just to compare the two. I'm calling it this, and then the 300mm is going to be 600mm. So right now though, I'm just shooting at these small birds here. It's just a feeder on top of a bin here. It's quite handy. I'm not trying to make a good image or anything like that. I'm just trying to get a sharp image of the bird, and it's a dark day. It's a great time to experiment with ISO. So that's what I've been doing here. I've been starting out with ISO 1600, which I know this camera can do quite well, and higher than that. Recently I've been shooting a lot higher with this camera just because I've been using Topaz denoise. I have a video on that in case you're interested, how to remove noise in your images, and it works really well. But today though, I'm really going to be pushing this, and we'll try all the way up to ISO 10,000, which I feel like that's way too high, but we'll push both of these systems up to ISO 10,000, and I'll show you back home on the computer because I can get kind of a feel for it if I look on the LCD screen here, but not the same as like actually looking on the computer. So I'll share with you guys my screen back home and what kind of images we get. Let's see what kind of quality we get from these two with high ISO. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly share with you guys the images that I got there, checking the ISO performance. So I got 5 images of each here. The blue ones here is the E-M1X, and the red one here is the Canon. So let's just go for both of them, and I arranged them here by ISO speeds, starting with 1600, and I actually tried all the way up to 12,800. So let's see how that went. Starting here with the 1600, let's compare them side by side. So then this is the left one here, the blue tit here is the that's the Olympus OM-D E-M1X, and we got the Canon 7D here. So this 1600, they can both do that fairly well, but it does introduce a fair bit of noise. As you can see here, they both have noise. This, I think I missed a little bit of the focus point here, so the robin with the Canon isn't actually that sharp. I think I probably focus pointed here or something like that. You see they both have loads of good detail, really nice detail in the eye, and the beak, the feathers here in the Olympus, and the same thing, except for the unfocused eye there. Good details in the feather and everything, and using denoise AI by Topaz, you'd clean this noise in the background right up. So 1600, totally fine with both of them, and they're fairly similar. There might be a tiny bit more noise in the Olympus, but I can't quite tell. They're very similar. So let's jump back out, 3200 then. And again, fair bit of noise, but we still have good details. There's a sharp eye here. We got little feathers and stuff like that you can see throughout. But there's definitely a bit more noise here, and the Canon 7D as well. It's got feathers, feather detail, lost maybe a little bit of detail here, but other than that, it's pretty good. And you see here the noise in the background. They put quite a bit of noise, but that also would clean up fairly well. Now 6,400. Now we're getting quite a bit of noise, and I wouldn't very often go this high. And I've done here with the Olympus is still on the left, and we got the Canon 7D on the right.
So there's quite a bit of noise introduced to both of them now. I'd say maybe a little bit noise here, as you can see in the background, maybe a little bit more on the Olympus with the blackbird here. But that's actually still quite a bit of feather detail here. So we haven't lost all details, you know, and even look at the scale here and the talons here. And there's quite a bit of detail here on the great tail of a 7D as well, but there's loads of noise. And now I've just bumped it all the way up to 10,000. Let's have a look here. And even now, zoomed out, you can see that there's quite a bit of noise in the background on both of them. And if we go further in, zoom in 100%, there's loads of noise now. And you know, we can actually, there's some feather detail here, but we've lost a lot of details. But still, where the main focus is the eye and the beak here, and the eye and the beak here. You actually, this is where I start seeing a little bit of a difference. I think there's slightly more noise in the Olympus one, but I feel like it has better detail. I feel like it has a little bit more detail, especially around the eye here and the beak here compared to this robin with the Canon 7D. There is still a bit of detail here of the robin as well, but you see here where the colors almost merge with the background here. You almost can't tell where the bird ends and the background begins. So both of them, loads of noise right now. Let's check out this one here. This is 12,800 ISO. So again, something I would never really use in the field with either of these cameras. And you can see now, even zoomed out at normal here, it's quite a bit of noise. If we zoom in 1:1, loads of noise. But we see there is actually still a fair bit of detail in the feathers. It's not all lost. And where it is sharp around the eye, the beak here, there's quite a bit of detail. I don't know if you can tell this, but I think that maybe the Olympus has a tiny bit more noise in the background here. But the bird itself, I think, is sharper. There's more detail in the Olympus one here, and the robin on the left compared to the robin on the right. So actually overall, with the Canon 7D Mark II crop sensor and the Olympus Micro Four Third OM-D E-M1X, I think that the Olympus has maybe a tiny bit more noise, but it has much more detail at higher ISO. This is 12,800. I wouldn't normally go this high, but you can still see there's loads of details in the feathers and the eye and the beak. And if you look at the Canon 7D, yes, there is a little bit of detail here in the feathers and the eye and the beak here, but it's less. It's not as sharp using this high ISO. So I think actually in the field, I wasn't sure if I could tell a difference, but looking at them now close up, I think the Olympus E-M1X outperforms the Canon 7D a little bit when it comes to noise and quality there.
Next up, I'm going to try depth of field to these two systems. So take a shot here with the Canon 7D. They're just very similar to me. So I'm going to have to get back to you from at home when I pull these files up in Lightroom. I'll take a couple of more test shots as well, just so I'm sure, with a couple of different backgrounds.
Okay, so now we're taking the images here that kind of checks the depth of field. And basically what I'm looking at here, my main concern was when I was using the Micro Four Third. With the 300mm f4, I was wondering how that shallow depth of field would be and how I would blur out my background. So I'm comparing that with the Canon 7D f400, which would be f5.6, and it's cropped to 1.6, and the Olympus is cropped out 2. So let's have a look here at the blue one again. On the left is the Olympus, and the red one here is the Canon. So let's pick these two, compare them side by side. So as you can see here on the left here is the Olympus, and we got the Canon on the right. I can't really tell, there's not much difference here. You can see a little bit more this kind of the whitish tree or branch in the background here on the Canon. This one is kind of slightly more blurred out, but not much of a difference. So I've picked a couple of images here just to see if I can see any kind of difference in that background kind of softness. So let's pick these two here. So I can kind of start to see a little bit that you see a bit more in the Canon 7D, and it's a little bit smoother in the Olympus, but only a fraction, not much at all, really. So then in my last image here, let's check that. And here, maybe a little bit again, you can see a little bit more here of the kind of, the branches are a little bit more visible in the Canon 7D with the 400 f5.6 compared to the Olympus 300 f4, a slightly softer and more blurred out background. So with the two, I don't think there's a big difference. I think they're quite similar when it comes to how they blur out the background.
Now, as you're all probably aware, this is a really lightweight system, and it is lighter than my Canon 7D and this 100-400 lens. And it works really well for me, especially because I'm out and I'm carrying this as a vlogging camera, and I want to be quite mobile and be able to walk around and shoot and film, and this setup has worked really well. And that's another thing with this, as I'll show you here, as I'll show you from another video I did, that the focus system is really good on this. Very often I find that the 7D Mark II often loses focus, whereas this stays on a lot better. And I'm also much more able to focus on things in between branches and still catch the bird behind that. Whereas that's something I've really struggled with this system, and that's partly why I started shooting with back button focus, actually, because then I can quickly just switch to manual focus when there's little branches or anything like that in the way. I don't have to change any other settings, I just change my focus. And that goes to say as well, I've been shooting B-roll with this of wildlife, and that has also works like a dream. I have set it up so there's a little switch here, kind of like on the Canon 7D Mark II. That I've set up so it just says 1 and 2 here because it's very customizable, but I've set it up so that's video on the on number 2 there, so I can just switch to that and then record, which makes it ideal for me when I want to capture some B-roll in between the shots that I take. So really enjoying that. It works perfect for me as I do a lot of vlogs when I'm out in the field, and the autofocus on the video is also superb. Like, this is a pretty horrible system for shooting B-roll with a long lens here. With the system that I have here, when I shoot video at 1080p, the autofocus is really slow and it's noisy, so you can hear it in my videos as well. And it's so easily loses focus with the autofocus on the video. So that has worked incredibly well with this system, and it's a very nice system to use when doing vlogs. So other questions I've gotten about this system is how it handles, how it feels in the hand holes, and I love the way this feels. Like, it just fits my hand really well, and it has the built-in battery grip, which is also very handy, and that fits very well as well. And it's got the same buttons on here, so I got easily 3 buttons up front here, plus the 2 dials on either side. So back button focus is there, you can want to switch to portrait, and there's loads of extra buttons here, all of them which I haven't even used, because having this for 2 weeks, it's a bit of a steep learning curve with everything you can do with it. So I've mostly just been focusing on the things that I know I wanted to focus on, the things that I wanted to use it for. Easy to use the dials on the back and front. And actually, when I went back to shooting with the Canon 7D, it felt really small in my hand. I didn't actually like it. I much prefer this. I've also gotten some questions about the menu system, and it is a steep learning curve for the menu system. It goes quite deep, but using, looking at videos online, I can put a couple of links to some people that I looked at. I think Tim Boyer and another guy, a Finnish guy who's an ambassador for Olympus. They got a lot of tutorials and stuff like that on setting it up. And one of the best advices I picked up from those videos was how to turn on basically my blinkies through the viewfinder. So it's very easy to set the exposure with this system, because when I'm looking through the viewfinder now, I've set it up so that if anything, if my highlights are blown out, it will show up red, and if I'm underexposed, it'll show up blue. It's very simple to just dial in the correct settings to get a good exposure. And other than that, the menu system, yes, it is quite deep, and once you've set something up, it might be hard to find again. So if there's something you might go back to and use quite often, I just put it on my menu. So at the end here you get a my menu, and it's very easy at any time when you find something that you think you're going to go back and use again, you just press the red button and you add it to the my menu. And then it's quickly there. So I've added my card setup, which is basically where I format the cards. And then I have a quick one to set my custom modes, because there are 4 different custom modes here. They've just gotten rid of all the weird automatic functions, which I really like. I much prefer the custom modes. So when I was photographing birds of flight, I had each one of these custom modes set up for different focusing kind of settings, so a different focus setting, and I also had one just for panning, so slow shutter speed and taking off image stabilization. I also got some questions of any annoyances that I found with this, and I'd say not many. I think there's 2 things that I picked up on so far while having it, and is that it's easy to change to basically if you have this hanging off your arm or something like that, it can be quite easy to hit the shutter button, take loads of images and maybe turn the dials. But I see now there is a lock function here. I never use it, so it hasn't bothered me much. It's happened a couple of times that I've taken some images that I didn't want to take, and it doesn't really bother me that much. Another thing was that to save battery, I've set it up so that it switches itself off, or it has like some kind of sleep mode on it after it might be a minute or something like that. And I think what happens then is that if I've pre-focused on something and it turns itself off and I go back on, it's lost that focus point. So it's then focused to something else, infinity or something, I don't know. But then again, that might be something that I just haven't learned in the short 2 weeks that I've had this. There's probably a way around that, or I could just not use the sleep mode function at all. So that's more to do with me, and I'm sure there are ways around this. And that's the whole review here. Is also it takes a long time to learn a system like this, as it does with any system. So it's not going to be 100% thorough. So get second, third opinions about this as well. Don't just rely on everything that I say here. Somebody's also asked me for battery life, and particularly with battery life, with turning GPS on and off. I don't have time enough to actually check on and off GPS, stuff like that. It's a little bit too involved since I only have this for 2 weeks, and it's also been the holidays, so I've lost a good few days over the holidays because of that. But the battery life on it is, as you probably expect, it's mirrorless. As you probably expect, it's going to go drain fast. So having the battery grip and 2 batteries on it is essential. In winter, so short days here in Scotland, the 2 batteries has lasted me all day. I haven't actually ran out of battery, and I've been shooting all day, or at least I've had it on all day. You know, I'm not always shooting. I'm walking around a bit, or I'm waiting or anything like that. So 1 battery's probably lasted me maybe 3-4 hours or something like that, depending on usage. So shooting in the summer, really long days, or if you're shooting really long days, you're using it a lot, you're probably going to want some more batteries. I would definitely buy 2 more batteries. I always have a backup. Great thing is though, there's a USB charger. I can charge this in the car when I travel, so I've used that a couple of times, which is always handy, but I didn't actually need it. For my settings with this camera, most of the time my default setting is full manual, and see here, I use the one focus point in the middle. And also then I've been other things I've been doing is I have the image stabilization on automatic, so that means that in theory it should turn off on panning, but as I said, I've made a custom mode as well for panning where the image stabilization is just turned off. Other than that, I have, I'm using the sequential low so that it's not a high burst, it's a low burst, and it makes a little bit of a sound because I kind of like that. There's a silent mode as well, which is brilliant, and I do use that if I'm getting really close to wildlife and I don't want to give away any noise. But I do like to have a little bit of a click usually, but it's very easy to just turn off to go into the kind of quick menu here, which you kind of would do with the Canon 7D Mark II EQ. This is just kind of a similar thing. Another thing, I have continuous autofocus plus manual focus, and I have that so that the manual focus is always available to me, because if not, I can't remember which one it is, but when you switch this on or off, it is in, like here I think, if you switch it down, it is in manual focus, and then you can't use autofocus unless you've actually switched that on, so that autofocus is always available. And I would recommend that because it's kind of an easy thing to do, and it stumbled me in the beginning. All of a sudden autofocus wasn't available to me. I didn't know what was going on. I have set up, I've done some custom functions here. I set up my back button focus. I much prefer that, and that also gives me the option to easily adjust manually if I need to. And then I've also set up, so you got the dials in the front and back, and since I'm in full manual, what I've done is I find that I don't actually often change my f-stop when I'm in full manual. You know, usually I'm wide open, and then if there's a special situation like I need more depth of field or anything like that, then I change it. To get the right exposure, I mostly use shutter speed and ISO. So I've actually set it up so that one of these dials, check here, one of these dials, the one on the back here, is my shutter speed, and the one in front is the ISO. And that becomes really quickly to just get the correct exposure. Yeah, for the other focusing modes, I've experimented with that, photographing the red kites again. I just use, as usual, I use one in the middle. Well, this is very customizable. I've heard that you can make your own custom grid, whatever you want, of these of the focus points, but that's not really something I need, or I'm not aware that I need that anyways. I've not been needing it so far. So I've been using the one in the middle, and sometimes I've changed it to the 5 in the middle, which is more shooting birds in flight, and if they're quite big, or if I have just sky as a background, then it becomes a bit easier to catch them. So that's what I've been using, and that's basically kind of the same as what I use on Canon 7D Mark II. I've experimented a little bit. There is a function here which is AF tracking, autofocus tracking. So it basically brings up, it's supposed to automatically capture what you're focusing at, and if that moves, it'll move along with it. And I've tried that a little bit, but I haven't found that much use for it. It was mostly trying to capture birds in flight that I used that for. And I tried it with the red kites at Argotty, and I think they're just a little bit too quick, and things changed a little bit too much, so it didn't really work for me in that situation. I'm sure there are situations where it would work, but I haven't found them yet, and I haven't been trying too much to get it, because I just like that middle point, and I can, you know, I compose as I need to, and it's a lot quicker for me because that's what I'm used to. So that's what I do. One more thing, the Pro Capture mode, which is a really exciting feature. Basically what it means is that if you hold the shutter button halfway, or if you're using the back button focus and you're focusing, I think the way it does it is it continuously takes images, but then it deletes them. And then when you press the shutter though, it will save those last second or something like that of images taken. So it's really good if you're waiting for an action, or for the birds in flight, the red kites in flight. I wanted to capture them kind of grappling. I tried it once at Argety with the red kites just as they were going into feed. Unfortunately, my memory card isn't fast enough, and it just stopped and it buffered for like 30 seconds, or it felt like a minute or something. It felt like forever. An incredible function, and I could see that it was working. I could see it does what it says, and it's very customizable as well. You can say how many shots you want it to have taken and everything. But unfortunately, I mean, I'm not gonna buy a new memory card, a very expensive memory card, when I only have this for 2 weeks. But if I had this camera, I would absolutely invest in that, because that is an incredible feature, and it seems to do exactly what it says it does. You just need to have the memory card that works with it. And when I tried it, I think I tried it at slightly the wrong moment. I got a little bit too trigger happy, and I didn't even get a good image from it, unfortunately, and I had to wait to take the next image. One more thing that is pretty incredible about this system is the image stabilization. It has, with the kind of original lens and the camera combined, it has a total of 7 stops image stabilization. Now, I've gone on about the 100-400 Canon R2 having very good image stabilization, and I've taken handheld 100th of a second, may even taken lower, and I've heard of people taking much lower. But this takes that to a new level. So basically, the amazing image stabilization means that, for instance, with a dipper, you'll be able to take a photo of a dipper, and as long as the dipper sits still and you've got fast moving water next to you, you can really blur that, get a motion blur in that water. And also it's got the flip out screen, which is very handy and something that I really miss on the Canon 7D. And I've also used the 40-150 f.2. I've used that a bit at Argety, photographing woodland birds and the squirrels. And I think there was some good results from that as well. So overall, I really like this system, and the main, I guess, kind of disadvantages is that it doesn't have the capability of using high ISO like a full frame would, and it might not have as good a depth of field as the equivalent, like as a 600mm f4 on a full frame. But the benefits of being so lightweight, taking it with you anywhere, good video, good focusing system, the pro capture, it has a lot going for it, and I really like this system. It's going to be weird actually going back to the Canon 7D Mark II now after having used this. But it's been a good experience, and thank you guys very much at Olympus for letting me try this out. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that I gave enough information for what you guys were asking about and what I wanted to test myself. If you have any other ones, please leave it in the comments, and hopefully I'll be able to answer it. If not, maybe there's somebody else out there looking at this and they have an answer for you guys, to maybe join in the discussion. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.